Welcome to Off the Record News. I'm your host, Diana Longrie. Thank you for tuning in. Off the Record News is brought to you from the Valley Access Studios out of Stillwater. Now, Off the Record News, once a month, we have as our guest Council Member Loren Sederstrom from the City of Grant. And it's that time again for his appearance on our program. So thank you, Councilmember Sederstrom, for being here.
Well, thank you, Diana Longrie, for perpetuating my all-around grant after I lost SCC. I greatly appreciate that you allow me to put my clips together and bring the current happenings of Grant into to the people.
Yes.
Thank you.
You bet. Now, we've got quite a few clips today. Plus, we're also going to do an update on the DFL caucuses that were held out in the area of the City of Grant. And so, Mr. Sederstrom, why don't you give us an update on the last council meeting, when you had it, and set up our first clip.
Okay, it was a very short meeting. It was from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock on Tuesday because by law they have to release them for the caucuses. They're not allowed by state law to have any meetings after 6 o'clock on Tuesday when they're having a caucus. So we had a short but brief meeting. We covered a lot of things in a short time. Once again, we're always trying to amend the agenda and the consent agenda. And of course, they're always fighting that. They do everything they can to not allow input from the minority. It doesn't matter if you put things in ahead of time. They've changed the rules and they say, well, unless it's got a majority vote, you can't get it on the agenda, even if you put all the stuff in ahead of time, like I did for the hydrovac, et cetera. So if they finally do put it on the discussion point, then they vote it down. So it doesn't matter how urgent it is.
And so I want to be clear for our viewers, when you're talking about they, you mean
the council majority.
Some of your fellow council members are actually trying to keep things from being on the agenda, trying to keep community issues from being discussed.
I don't know if you ever heard of that before, but it's the Huber Cop car. Dennis Kopp, Jeff Huber, and Tom Carr are the three majority, and Denny is the new man on there, and he votes with the majority. I mean, he seconds everything. Very seldom does he have input, but we went from secondhand Tina to secondhand Denny. So the first one, we're talking about amending the agenda. We'll play this and we'll talk on the other side.
Okay, let's take a look.
Second?
Okay, give me a list and we'll take a vote, Larry.
All right, we have two things. The first item I'd like to add is on to new business discussion to prevent Met Council intrusion into Grant, much like Mr. Bauman was talking about.
Okay, and what's second?
And language to be included, in the purpose of the discussion is to develop language to be included into our comprehensive
Okay, what is your
plan.
second issue? What else would you like to answer?
The second item is move to add expungement and formal apology to Mr. Tim Dewusky for false statements entered into the city
Okay,
council
we have a
minutes
first
to
and a
prevent
second.
further
Those in
litigation.
favor of changing our regular agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and those opposed to changing our agenda? No. Thank you. Let's move on.
One of those items had to do with the Metropolitan Council and the idea of not having the Metropolitan Council have certain edicts upon the City of Grant, correct?
Yes, because we want to keep Grant rural, we want to keep sewer and water out, we want to keep our 10-acre minimums. Lake Elmo lost their fight because one of the things they did very unwisely is they brought sewer and water in for the shopping district and didn't read the fine print that said they had to provide it to 1,700 homes. Well, that's kind of like going to Towsley Ford and buying a new Mustang convertible and saying, going back at the end of the month, geez, I love this car, but your payments really suck, you can have them. If you sign a contract, you're bound by the good and the bad in both ends of it.
That's right. And what I want to bring up to our viewers, in that by them not allowing this to be on the agenda, it's actually contrary to the philosophy that they have been espousing as elected officials. Because one of the criteria that they used when they were looking for the new city attorney, and that was part of the questioning of the candidates for the new city attorney position, was what type of experience does that attorney have to support the City of Grant in keeping the City of Grant rural and in understanding the edicts of the Metropolitan Council so that the Metropolitan Council doesn't have that type of impact on the city of Grant. So on the one hand, they are saying and indicating that they support that, and they're asking for that in their city attorney. But now on the other hand, when it's an opportunity to put it on the agenda to discuss it in public, they vote it down.
Well, to further elucidate this, to bring it to light, is one of the things you've heard of hands-on management. Well, these guys are hands-off. The mayor, Jeff Huber, the deputy mayor, Tom Carr, who was the former mayor, they don't want to deal with this at all. So what they do is they give it to the planner, Jennifer Haskamp. Now, Jennifer Haskamp was the planner in Lent, which is north of Wyoming. They've just replaced her with someone else. And that's what we were attempting to do, is get a planner-engineer combination that, one, save the city money, you know, and not have to have the extra expense, and two, move forward with this. But again, the mayor and deputy mayor hands off. They give it to the planner and the engineer and tell them to do whatever they do, so public never gets an input into it. And the shocking thing I showed before in a previous program about the planner talking about senior citizen low-income housing and bringing that into Grant. Well, wait a minute, we can't do that because that violates our 10-acre. We do not have multiple density in Grant. And so basically what the major theme of this administration is to not allow citizens to participate, do not have any transparency, do not let the public know what's going on. All of a sudden, they bring it forward and pass an ordinance at done. There is no input, there's no hearings, and no one knows what's going on.
And another underlying issue that I see in having you on this program once a month is the lack of public policy direction being created by the council at council meetings, where they then take that public policy and then direct that to then the employees and the contractors that are hired by the city to do the day-to-day work. Because in essence, it is the responsibility of the elected officials to create the public policy, and then that is from what then your consultants and your planners and your city administrator, that's what they operate from. And it's not sufficient to just say, go and just do whatever you do and bring us back a proposal and we'll vote it up or down. You have to give direction by creating public policy, that you vote on these public policy resolutions, and then you have your elected officials standing for something so that they're accountable to the people of their community.
Well, I agree with you. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Yes.
But we have a very current example of that, the grading permit. If you recall, in a couple of shows I've talked about the hydrovac dumping, where this man had 12 or 13 acres of land and turned it into a hydrovac dump site, and he dumped 400 to 500 hydrovac trucks. Well, they refused to put that on the agenda. Many citizens have complained about it, have asked about it, and they absolutely refused to discuss it. The new attorney, the first time he was on there, recommended twice at that particular meeting that it be given to the engineer and the planner for review. They refused to do so. So basically, they're really avoiding input, they're avoiding giving direction, and they're just buffaloing everything. We should have a hydrovac ordinance. I'm working on that. We're going to see what we can get through, but once again, they have no input. And going back to the grading permit, a lot of the things that I said should be in the grading permit. For example, if you bring dirt in, you have to tell where it comes from. You have to have something called a manifest. If you bring dirt out, there has to tell where it's going. Now they have to have a review 48 hours before you start work. So a lot of the things I was going for hydrovac, they incorporated into a grading permit through the direction of the planner. But this was never discussed at a city council meeting. It came back. It wasn't even voted on. They just said that's the new grading permit, period. I mean, it doesn't sound like democracy to me. It's kind of like they're following Stalin.
That's right. And I want to get back to that last clip, the one other comment that I had, is that when you've got 3 different things that you want to add to the agenda, and if you think one of those things is going to be controversial, such as the apology that was being requested, one way that city council members can address this is either do it as it was, and there would be the list of the 3, and then the council majority who doesn't agree with the one item could say, well, I would like to make a friendly amendment to that motion. And so if indeed they support the first item and the second item, but not the third, they could make that friendly amendment as a way to indicate and to signal, we support these other 2 things, but not the third. And then that way, then the person who made the motion could say either they accept it or don't accept it, and then you could take a vote on the things that everybody agrees on.
Well,
so that way, you could actually have had, for instance, the first item about the Metropolitan Council, that could have been put on the agenda. In essence, what the council majority did is that they just used their power of the vote indiscriminately, rather than saying, okay, we do agree with some of what you're asking for, but not everything you agree with, that not everything you're asking for that do we agree with. And so you see, there's no give or take here.
Well,
and that's hard to operate as an effective council when your majority is just indiscriminately using their power of the vote to crush everything down.
It's common sense. You make one at a time so it's standalone. You
Yes,
wouldn't
and you
have the
could do
problem
that
if you
too.
make one motion and then you nail them down and hold them accountable for what they
Yes.
want to discuss or not discuss.
Yes, that's correct.
The next thing we're going to is the consent agenda, and we've talked about this many times before. In parliamentary procedure, it only takes one person to take things off the consent agenda for discussion. Of course, they've changed the policy, and they say it has to be a motion and a second and a vote, which is, so they're talking about the consent agenda, and so if we could play that clip, and we'll talk on the other side.
Okay, by your motion to approve the consent agenda, and you got a majority vote, you're gonna approve it irregardless.
Okay, do you have a point to make other than
Yeah,
politics?
my
Please.
point is, you say that we do not send stuff in. If you, I'll provide you with the email, the item to be listed on the agenda, added on, were sent in and requested to be on tonight's agenda. So it's not like it's a surprise to you. It was sent to our city clerk, administrator clerk. It was on there for that. The corrections to the minutes were sent to her, but they're not reflected in the minutes, so.
Okay, very good.
It
Mr.
has been
Carr?
sent in, so
Hang on.
don't say this is just
Okay.
all of a sudden last
We will,
minute.
we
Can I
will.
make a comment?
Yeah, hang on, Mr. Carr was first. We will go ahead and investigate that very quickly, Mr. Lunu, and we'll try to figure out why that's going on. Mr. Carr?
Well, again, the only point I would say is that, if the minutes were wrong, then they should have been adjusted and if they were an issue that between the administrator clerk and Larry, then we would have heard about it. If they weren't, just because you make the request doesn't mean it's magically gonna happen like it's true. And just because you wanna, anything you wanna do, just doesn't make, you're just not gonna get it on the agenda. We talked about that before too.
Right.
So, if it's not on there, the only person I would blame is you.
That is a great way to really build camaraderie. The only person I'm going to blame is you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, once again, they're maintaining a control. It's very interesting because they don't want to do anything. They don't want to engage in policy discussions. They want everything to take place backdoors with the consultants. Now, the consultants are kind of, the one platter is kind of opening it up for development. That's what she's doing. It's the sewer and water is ready to go on County Road 17, which is Lake Elmo Avenue. They have 4 oversized pumps. They're normally 12 to 15 horsepower. They put in 4 50 horsepower pumps with a 4-foot sewer line. This is at the end of the line, by the way, so nothing is going in there. It's just sitting there waiting. Because you don't put the big pumps at the end of the line, you put them the middle or wherever it is to get it there. So they have no function other than to serve for future development. Well, we've already seen them telegraph subtly about senior citizen multiple housing, which Grant doesn't have. We have 2 duplexes in the city and a trailer park. That's the low-income housing we have. And so what they do is policy doesn't get formulated by the city council. They send it to to the planner, the engineer, whatever they come up with. And that example of the grading permit again, they didn't even review it when it was done. It was just adopted and automatically put into practice. So again, there's no transparency, there's no discussion, and they're letting the...
And no oversight. See, and that is an issue that I have in looking at some of this, is that there's no oversight or process for oversight. And that's really part of the role that the elected person plays, is to be there to be the eyes, the ears, and the mouth for the community and how City Hall is run.
Well, I don't think that's the way it works in the fiefdom of Huber. But the next one, we're going to be talking about the minutes, so let's play that clip and we'll talk on the other side.
Lauren, you're up.
Mayor and council members, that used to be the case as far as changing your own words, but the city recently, 2 months ago, went to action-only minutes.
Pardon me, you're right. Thank you
So-
very much. You're right. Action-only minutes are what is being reflected in the minutes at this point, so unless the actions are incorrect, that's the only thing that can be changed. Lauren, did you have something?
That is a distinction that we have made on this program before, is that there's different types of minutes that a governmental entity can decide are taken. And many communities are taking this move towards action-only minutes, which means that it only lists what was the agenda item, what was the motion, and what was the vote, and who seconded, who made the motion, who seconded it, and what the vote was. That there's never any commentary, that there's never any discussion that's included as part of it.
Well, one of the things this does is it limits the transparency of government. There's no record of what's been said unless you have the DVD like I do, so you know exactly what the arguments were, what was brought up. And it's also, it kind of relates back to the competency of the person taking the minutes, which in this case isn't always the best. So it's another way of, putting a blind over the democratic process. If you can't discuss things, you can't hold people accountable for what they've said. You don't know what the stand is. You know what the protests or what the other side of it is. We should be able to discuss the positive, the pros, and the cons, the negatives. And this does not allow for people to see what the discussion was, what the reasoning was for making the decision.
The historical perspective as well, Mr. Sederstrom, you mentioned that it doesn't reflect what the pros, the cons were, the discussion points. And you see minutes under the Minnesota State retention policy for documents, minutes are to be kept forever. And so they are the historical documents of the city. And so when people look back 20, 30, 40 years from now, all they will see with action minutes is simply what the motion was, yes or no. And that doesn't give any context to that historical perspective. And I think a lot is lost in the history of a community by having action-only minutes.
We just had an example of that here recently where a lady way back when had a 20-acre lot and she split it in half. Well, she did it so the back lot had no front footage, road frontage, and the front lot had all of it. So someone buys the lot later and then she wants to split it the other way. Well, we have no commentary on what was said. And so now the city rubber stamped that the back 5-acre lot, because the lines weren't erased, is an illegal lot because it wasn't changed. And again, that's muddying up the policy of our 10-acre minimums, and that lots have to have road frontage. So again, had we had complete notes, that would have been clarified. Mm-hmm. But now we're going to talk about agenda submissions, and we can talk on the other side of that. Points I want to make about putting things on the agenda. Multiple times, 2 or 3 months in a row, I gave definitions of hydrovacs, a proposed ordinance. Mm-hmm. It never made it on the agenda. I put on the top of the paper when I handed it in, please place under new business, because we had a crisis up here with a guy dumping 400 hydrovacs. And so that is not true that you can easily put things on the agenda. When we have a threat to our water, which I thought was a very serious threat,
okay,
I couldn't get it on the agenda. You wouldn't allow it.
Actually, Lauren, we discussed it, as I believe we discussed it last month, and the council majority decided that since there had been so much trespassing going on, so much filming on other people's property, that a gun had been pulled.
Here, for example, is the, where I said agenda items for the council. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yeah.
Upgraded permit with penalties for enforcement, updated 32-245 zoning and hydrovac operations. Here's the suggested amendments. Then I have the amended change to 32-45. So this was all put there. They just chose to ignore it, didn't want to do anything about it.
This implies, Mr. Sederstrom, that when you hand in something to the city clerk for submission to the agenda, to be placed on the agenda, that somewhere in the back room, that decision is being made either by the city clerk or by the city clerk in conjunction with the mayor, or is it that the council majority is making this decision? In which case, that would be a violation of the open meeting law. Now, certainly, all council members should have access to being able to put items on the agenda. In some cities, because they're concerned about one rogue city council member putting many things on the agenda that shouldn't be there, they have a rule that says if 2 members support putting it on the agenda, then it gets on the agenda. So at least that there's some kind of checks and balances there. But this idea that you can submit something to be put on the agenda, but you don't actually really know who's deciding whether it stays or it goes is hogwash.
Well, what they do is they put it for a discussion item. Then it never gets
And
fully
when you
discussed.
but when you say they, who is they? Who is deciding that outside of the meeting? Is it they, the city majority? If it is they, the city majority, deciding this outside of the meeting, that's a violation of the open meeting law.
Well, what they're doing is they've changed a procedure that you cannot in fact put anything on the agenda. What you have to do is submit it for a discussion item, and if they decide at the discussion that they want to put it on, it will be put on the agenda. But rarely does it's never happened. For example, with the hydrovac and the grading change, they just directed the engineer and the planner to look into it. By the next meeting, it was announced that we had a new grading permit. It was never brought back for the council for approval or voting. It just magically happened. So that's what they're doing. They're squeezing it down. So there's no transparency. There's no discussion. And I think we're not done with this because our new city attorney will weigh in on this in the next clip. So if we could play that.
Well, I look forward to it. Let's take a look.
Where we are. The principle is that if we want to suggest something for the agenda, we submit it in writing. There's an indication that a couple things may have been proposed for tonight's short and abbreviated meeting because we got caucuses. Those include Councilmember Lanou's suggestions. We'll take a look at the tracking of those over the last couple of days and certainly assist Mr. Lanou with advancing those formal requests in writing. And then once they're put in writing, the council will make a decision about whether or not they will make the agenda, given the time constraints, given the agenda load, given the merits of the proposition. And then you can have a vote on it at that time. And so I've taken notes as to the 2 subjects that Mr. Lanou referenced, and we'll track those down. And recognizing tonight is a short meeting, if council deems that in March those would be heard, that'll be for council to decide.
I'm unsure then, is he saying that he's going to decide if they go on the agenda as a discussion item? Or how do you get to discuss them in March to decide if they're going to be discussed in March? Because you guys aren't having another meeting between now and March.
What's going to happen is he's going to draft something, put it on the discussion list, then it technically will be discussed, and then they will vote up or down, which will probably be down because it's always a 3-2 vote for putting things on the agenda. So it's never going to make the agenda, I can tell you that right now. As long as the process is like it is, nothing gets on the agenda that they do not want to deal with. So what we're now shifting gears to is town hall use policy. We have a letter from Lori Swanson, the state attorney general, that says, in fact, if citizens within Grant are allowed to use the town hall, which are currently 2 citizen groups are, the Gateway Trail Association, and Woodland Acres. And Woodland Acres is a planned unit development, which we only have 2 or 3 of them in the city. And they have kind of a cooperative board, and they pay annual dues, and they're smaller areas. And if you have to pay into this, it's kind of like a townhouse association. Same, similar idea, except it's Woodland Acres. You have your own 2 or 3 or 4 acre lot, et cetera, et cetera. And so we now have, they now are, because there was a lawsuit initiated, backed up with the letter and legal opinion of Lori Swanson, that it has to be allowed to be used for other people, like there was supposed to be a cert.
So they can't pick and choose who is allowed to use City Hall. If they open it up for one group of people, they have to have it opened up for other groups of people and have the same policies applied to everybody. Correct?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So let's play this clip and we'll go on the talk on the other side.
Council, the city has been presented with a complaint, formal complaint that relates to the town hall usage. As you all know, the town hall is an older building that doesn't have internal bathroom facilities and is, in order to use it, city staff, the one internal city staffer has to come and turn the heat on and unlock it and lock it, and it's not functional as a multi-purpose municipal building often is. The complaint, if I could, indicates that some groups, 2 groups are allowed to use it by virtue of their longstanding historical access and use of it, but other groups have not been permitted to do that. And to the extent I understand it, and I haven't been present, that position is reflective of the city's recognition of what resources it can and can't properly devote to opening, closing, securing, heating, and managing town hall access. In other words, if it was to receive more frequent access, there'd be a much higher level of commitment from staff to make it available, and that's apparently not, in the city's view, an appropriate utilization of its resources. Plus, there's expensive audiovisual equipment in it that needs to be secured at all times. So the question is, what does the council wish to do about it in the face of this complaint? The lawyer for the league has suggested that the city, in view of the complaint, eliminate non-council, non-planning commission use of the facility.
So in order to have a consistent policy, what I understand then, and I'm sure that this is what this is leading up to, we're just not going to let anybody from the public use the public building.
That's right. They passed the motion that no one would be able to use it. Of course, it was a 3-2 vote once again. And so the new attorney's kind of walking the fence. They don't listen to him either, because last time they suggested that they send the hydrovac issue to the engineer and the planner for review, and they refused to do it. Now here we're having a discussion about town hall use. The next clip is going to be Larry Lanoux discussing town hall use. So if we could play 575, please.
Recently, the council majority has denied use of town hall for the Charter Commission to have its meetings, a commission that the city majority petitioned the district court to form. They have denied use to the grant restoration project to form a certified, a CERT team, which is a certified emergency response team. So they've denied use for that in conjunction with the Washington County Sheriff's Office. They've denied the Citizens Grant to form a road committee and meet in our building. They've denied the Citizens Grant to address a Valley Branch flooding recently and meet in our own town hall. And just as recent as last month, they've denied the grant restoration project to discuss, review, and offer input into our comprehensive plan. So as you can see, it's not so much about can we or can't we, because obviously your policy allows 2 groups to do that. As our attorney said, It's an issue having somebody come in and open the building. Well, I've talked to the people at the Woodland Acres, and really, it's not an issue. You've got a 4-digit code. You give them the code. You don't drive here to open up the building. It's that simple. If the issue is that we have video equipment up here, then I recommend that the city take out Comcast video equipment and buy its own video equipment. Truth of the matter is, we're not really worried about whether the video equipment is going to come and steal it from the same group that's going to be asking for use of the building. And if it were to be, I believe it would be insured, or it should be at that point. So I'd like to make.
One of the ways that you can ensure that people do not walk off with the equipment is that you simply require that there be a deposit placed in advance of the meeting. So that would be a very simple fix, and especially if it was an organization that was doing recurring meetings once a month, once a quarter, they could have one deposit placed into escrow with the city that is always there, and as long as nothing's missing, there's no trouble. I mean, that would be a very simple fix. And one of the issues I heard the city attorney mentioning about that there's really maybe not that much use to warrant having it open. Well, on the other hand, if it suddenly was the policy that it was open to public groups from the community, there would be more usage of it, because the reason that there's less usage of City Hall is because that usage policy has been so restrictive.
Well, they use a lot of excuses, like I don't know if we have it on this clip or not. I don't know if I bothered to make the clip. Well, how often do we have to have an exterminator? And they had mice because they left food in here. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a town hall that was built in 1914. You don't think there are cracks where mice can get in? Wake up, smell the coffee. They use every excuse they can. They distort the facts. Continually they distort the facts. They kicked 4-H out of there, and they're saying, oh no, they left because of the bathroom situation. And we're going to have another situation in another clip coming up very shortly, talking about the distortions, the lies, the deceptions these people continually perpetuate. It is a serious problem. And so we're going to go to the next clip, and I'm talking about town hall use and some of the distortions, and we'll talk on the other side. In 5 minutes, we've had multiple distortions already. I personally,
Yes,
in fact,
I agree.
opened this town hall, using the code, turning it on. I forget what it was a couple of years ago. It isn't like you have to, our hardworking clerk has to come out here and do it. I've done it. So that's one of the distortions, I guess it's always kind of interesting, the things that we're talking about, like the citizen that he was referring to. Gee, the citizen was from Scandia. But that's, once again, you're trying to paint me with a black paintbrush and distort things, and, I'm just really sick of it. There's a lot of false statements. The AV room is locked, so they're not going to be able to steal any of the control stuff. I think we should be able to allow the citizens to use this. I mean, I go to the church that they're talking about, and there are a lot of requests for the use of that building. I think we should try to accommodate our citizens more.
Mr. Sederstrom, I know that you didn't address the comment about the mice in that particular clip. However, I would assert that the fact that the city of Grant is looking to preserve their rural character, I think since you guys are in the countryside, I would be willing to bet that mice are included in that countryside.
Oh, I think so too. Well, the mice are included, and we have 3 big rats on the city council. But I have the official...
Well, first of all, let's back up a little bit, because, before you get to that, because we heard it a little bit on the end of the clip before this, where, again, Mayor Huber was making some allegation that somehow or other that you're out running around the countryside in the city of Grant, brandishing a gun, pulling it out on residents of the city of Grant, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
And that's what his allegation is.
Which he brings up.
And is that allegation correct, or
Absolutely,
is it false?
absolutely false. I was in my house, I was sleeping, which the police report says. He went to the door to find a male yelling about trespassing and who was driving the other truck. He asked the individual to leave numerous times, and the individual did not. Again, Sederstrom asked the other gentleman to leave, and he did not. He still kept yelling and standing on the porch. It should be noted that the complainant was inside his residence and later identified the individual of Michael Paul Waldenberg was outside the residence. At this point, Sederstrom stated he was in fear for his personal safety, at which time he grabbed his 9mm pistol from inside the doorway of his residence and pointed at Waldenberg and told him to leave his property. At that point, Waldenberg returned to leave.
And he left.
He left.
And so the point to get across here is, one, you mentioned it in that last clip, that the individual actually is from Scandia. It's not a resident of Grant. Two, you're not running around the countryside of Grant brandishing your gun.
Okay.
And three, you were in your household, fearful that this guy who was very angry and pounding on your door and screaming and yelling and who wouldn't leave, that he was going to bust down the door and do you harm. So you see, all this hullabaloo by Mayor Huber is all just a fabrication. And we've got the police reports here to prove
And
it.
it also says in there that I was not the one at his property. He thought he followed me back. It should also be noticed that Sederstrom has a permit to carry a gun and was in the time of the gun pointing. There will be no charges in this case as no crime has occurred.
Right.
Once again, of course, you have to realize, ladies and gentlemen, there's an election coming up in November. I will be running again. I'm the canary in the coal mine on this city council because of all the underhanded dealing and the dangerous situations like the 400 hydrovacs that dumped in Grant, of which we knew 6 of them came in on a Saturday night from 3M, the Chemical Research Building, and the mayor chooses to do nothing about because I believe he has some connection to Morehouse, who is the one that owns David's Hydrovac. So there's a dubious connection here somewhere. I don't know what it is. Why someone would choose to ignore it and allow that to happen. Many residents have been up in arms because they do not want their wells contaminated. A few weeks ago in Egan, there was a gas line break and 21,000 gallons of gasoline appeared on the surface by a shopping center. What did they send down there to suck up the gasoline with? Oh, that's right. It was hydrovac trucks. So when the hydrovac truck gets called out for an emergency, they do not know what they're going to be putting in that hydrovac until they get there. So many times, unless the MPCA is involved and called about a huge spill like this, they'll just go dump it wherever they dump it. In this case, this individual brags on his website that he has multiple sites all over the county that he dumps things on. Washington County Environmental has been very concerned about this. The MPCA has limited ability. The only way the MPCA can get involved if it involves over disruption of 1 acre. And I talked to the supervisor at the MPCA, and they said that this is a local issue. They do not have jurisdiction, the local municipality. I've also talked to the Minnesota Department of Health. And if people have been watching the news recently, it's just come out that 3M has been covering up a lot of their dumping going back to 1958. There's currently a big lawsuit. It's just been put on hold. This is as of the 10th, which is today. So it's very interesting, the cover-up that's going on and the complicity with which the Mayor Huber works with this.
Mm-hmm. And I think you brought up a very good point that who has jurisdiction over this issue is the municipality, and that is the city of Grant. So how they can protect their groundwater is by ordinances that ensure that there are safeguards so that that type of dumping, which would contaminate the groundwater, doesn't occur.
Well, I'm still working on that. I'm going to attempt to get something, but as you see, when you put it on the discussion, it gets put on for the next meeting, and of course, Huber's been saying, oh, there's trespassing. Excuse me, and you can correct me on this because you have the legal background. It is not trespassing if you go on someone's land and they A, have not warned you that you are trespassing, or B, there are no trespassing signs. So if you walk on someone's lawn, that technically is not trespassing unless they've told you or there is a sign. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So
right.
Once again, there's misinformation, basically lies going around. Oh, we can't address this because we're going to get sued because of all the trespassing. No, there was not trespassing. The videos of this site were taken by Mr. Lanou when there were no trespassing signs. I took the picture of the hydrovac truck from the neighbor's property through the tree line. I didn't step foot on that when I put it out in the flyer. So I was not trespassing. So again, this is lies, it's mudslinging, and this is the kind of crap that I have to deal with, where he's trying to paint me with a paintbrush that I'm a criminal. So we can go to the next clip, I guess.
Immediately, the City of Grant Town Hall procedure, would be correct, would be amended per the sections I'm looking at, which would be the third paragraph and the fourth paragraph being struck.
Okay.
And the people that were using the town hall be notified that, of this decision. And I would second.
All right. All those in favor of this, oh, please, Mr. Schneider?
Just to clarify, that fourth paragraph runs to the second page, so the first line of that, on that second page.
Thank you, sir. That's it?
Yes, it does. Goes from 13 to 14 back here.
So
Oh, it's
basically-
on the back. Basically, we're voting on this, on the strikeouts. Is that understandable, clerk? Very good. All those in favor of Mr. Carr's motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Thank
You notice there was no second on that motion either. So you see, they never had a second on the motion. They operate by their own rules. Whatever they do, whatever they want. This is the fiefdom of Huber. It isn't the City of Grant.
You know, you bring up a good question. You've got a motion, there's no second, and yet there's a vote. Is the vote valid if there was no second? I'd have to do a little research on that, but that's a puzzling question.
Well, that's just some of the example of what goes on. This isn't really a democracy. It's more like a dictatorship. We're talking now about the cable package. If you're a cable commissioner, you get a chance to go and vote on policies and procedures, which I was on for a couple of years. Now Huber's back on, but they then give you as a perk a premium cable package. But what they've done is got rid of Channel 15, which is public television, Channel 14, which is a religious channel. So there is nothing really to review. But then you get all the other channels, all the premium channels that's worth $200 a month. And that's the issue that's coming up, because that is $2,400 a year. And that is a gift. And there are stringent laws that saying public officials cannot accept gifts. So we're going to now see the opinion, which is kind of wishy-washy, about this cable package from the new attorney. So if you could play the next clip.
I stopped in her several times and I've asked for it, so at this time, I would like to, before we go further, ask for his opinion whether the mayor is allowed to accept a service as per Minnesota statute. If you'd like, I can give you a refresher on that and give you a copy of it.
Dave?
Well,
I know you've had it.
You asked a question, let him answer it.
yeah, if I could, I mean, so Councilmember Lanou, we did receive that request from you. Pursuant to the council's direction, our action items, our work items, come from the council as a whole, not individual council members. My own view is, and I think I'm correct in this, is that I'm not entitled or permitted to go ahead and undertake original research into questions that come independently from council members. That said, I can answer your question, but I think this is a common understanding and practice that
Certainly, it is a common practice, and I think that part of the rationale behind it originally was that the cable commissioners are part of the regulatory body who is supposed to be providing oversight of the cable services that are being provided to the community. So with that intent in mind, the question then ultimately is, how is Mayor Huber serving in that capacity as a cable commissioner in fulfilling his oversight duties as part of the regulatory body? And ultimately, if he's not fulfilling them, well then he's getting something for free that other people are not getting. On the other hand, if he's fulfilling his regulatory duties, well, then that's part of what he needs. But nobody really knows how he's performing now, do they?
Well, not only that, he has nothing to say about what the major cable channels have. That's out of his purvey. He cannot do anything about that. The only thing he can look over is the local channels, which I believe is like 16, which is a government channel, and they just play all the government meetings, and 19 is an in-house where they do a lot of sports. So what is there to monitor?
Right, because they got rid of all the other channels as a result of Maplewood pulling out of the Ramsey Washington Suburban Cable Commission Joint Powers Agreement, which of course killed all the public access channels in all the other communities because Maplewood took all the money that was part of the Comcast subscriber monies from the Maplewood subscribers.
And they're still paying this, by the way, but the interesting thing is there was a way to keep it going the way it was. They would have had to do, the schedule was set up. If someone would have brought a DVD in, they could have played it. But because some of these, like my show, has been critical of his administration,
Of Hubert's
and Huber and
administration.
Carr bringing the transparency. That's why they got rid of videotaping public comment. They don't want the people to see anything that isn't what they're saying. That's why they won't discuss things at city council meetings. That's why it's an action only. Again, this is as close to a cover-up as you can possibly get. There's no transparency. They're always publishing things in the short version, so you never even know it's, a couple times, because it has to be unanimous or 4/5, we do get some ordinances published, like when they changed the lot line situation. I was adamant about that, and we got it, so they had to publish the whole ordinance, which was 3 paragraphs. Zippity-doo-dah, the difference between $50 and $300. And for a lot of, and again, you have to realize the median age in Grant is probably 50 or 60. Not a lot of young people have come out there. They can't afford it because it's a 10-acre minimum. You can't find a house for $300,000. You better start looking at $500,000 and up, because it comes with acreage, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the problem there with the cable package. And Huber was a major impetus in that. He's very aggressive,
And a major
domineering, and he made sure that they got rid of that because it was affecting
And
him.
they got rid of what?
Channels 15, which is the educational channel, and channel 14, which is the religious channel. And a lot of those people had direct services. It was just an outcry from a lot of people and senior citizens. But anyway,
And Channel 15 was the public access channel where all the community-produced programming was on, correct?
absolutely.
Yes.
Well, now we're going to the next one, and it's Larry Lanoux talking about agenda items.
Language, I've researched a little bit on the right-of-way clearing. Pretty simple language. The language I'm going to suggest is the city of Grant will be clearing trees and brush out of the right-of-ways. Anything less than 6 inches in diameter is considered brush, and the city legally has the right to remove it.
And let me stop you just real quick. I don't have that in my packet. Does anyone have Larry's language in his packet?
You don't have to, it's an update. You wouldn't have an update. I'm giving you the update.
I'm asking a question, please. I'm just wondering if any of us have had the opportunity to review this language. Clerk?
No.
Okay, so it's brand new to us. Okay, Larry?
It's new. I'm giving you an update. I don't have to send you my update before we get here.
It would be nice, just so that we would be up to speed
I'm
with you.
just saying that
Be good.
trees 6 inches and under are considered brush, and the city has a legal right to remove it.
And where do you wish to put
I'm
this language?
providing this language. I'll give it to our city attorney
Okay.
for him to put it into the next month's council item,
But
for an agenda item, and he can review it, look at it.
can I ask a question, please? Just one quick question,
Well,
Larry.
maybe you'll let me finish what I'm talking
But-
about, and then
but
we'll finish it up.
I don't think
at the end.
anyone understands where this language is supposed to go, Larry, is what I'm asking. Just where do you want to put it? Where is it? Where's it going?
Talking about for a future agenda item for discussion. It's language to be looked into for a future agenda item.
We'd like to know what the issue is.
Did you see discussion items, says city council reports, future agenda items? I provided language for a future agenda item to our city council for next council meeting.
I'm sorry, we're just a little confused, Larry. We're
It's
wondering.
not that confusing, Jeff. It's
Could I ask a-
under
can I
discussion
ask a
items,
question,
city council
please?
report,
Okay.
future agenda items. That's
Okay.
exactly what I provided a copy for
Very good.
a future agenda item. It's that simple.
But Larry.
Got my next item.
Well, no, we're going to continue asking you questions here because we need to understand this, because in order for it to be a future agenda item, this council is going to need to vote on it. You do not go ahead and put future agenda items on by yourself. We just discussed this, as you might remember, a little while ago. Tom, do you have a question?
Yeah, the question.
Still not
Kevin,
done.
No, we have a question on your agenda item, which you have handed to the attorney, so now it's time to take questions on it, okay?
I have a question. I don't recall, I don't have our last agendas when Larry had put things on, but isn't this discussion area, isn't this where we would list, or was this under new business? I can't remember. Things that were gonna come up on the next agenda or discussion items, were those listed on this section last time? All those A, B, C, D, E, F, G?
Yeah,
That's where they were?
yes.
They're not on here now?
Nope.
No.
Okay, so if they're not on here now.
Right.
We don't have any information, then you don't just to go willy-nilly throwing things on there, and I love that word, just picking out of the air stuff and sitting here saying this is, because, so you can grandstand up here and we don't know what's going on.
Yes.
So if you want to put things on, again, you have to let the clerk know, the administrator know, that you want to put things on there, you have to have the backup information, you put it on there, we would love to have it in our packets, so we can actually have an intelligent discussion with you, we hope, about anything that you have to discuss. But if we don't have anything, we're sitting here, we
Quiet
are
down.
sitting,
Quiet
excuse
down.
me,
Quiet down.
we are sitting
You're
here.
going to be removed if you keep saying that, sir.
Now, he's submitting this for next month's discussion item, which is their requirement. Now, see how they're twisting it around and saying it has to be in the packet? No, you don't. You're saying, I'm submitting this list of items for next month's discussion items. And they're fighting them on that. They want no input from us. What they want to do is just, blow smoke, muddy the waters, and what this whole issue is brushing. Unless we have an ordinance, they just take, say there's a 3-inch diameter scrub brush. They only take the top 3 feet off the Wright or Asplin Tree Service because they're hired by XL Energy to keep the branches away from the electric lines, if they're there. Well, we're trying to adopt the standard language that many municipalities have, so that allows them, unless if it's 6 inches in diameter or smaller, they can take the whole tree down. Because if you drive around Grant, the ditches are not clear. They're full of brush right up to the edge of the road. So that's one of the, and they're too cheap in the way they're doing it. The road contractor, they hire one road contractor, and he's not going to spend the money on it. He gets paid all year, but he does minimal work. And that's one of the problems. They're trying with all efforts to not allow us to put things on the agenda. We can't even, he was trying to not even put it in for discussion for next month when Larry handed it to him. So you see how they're trying to stonewall everything we do.
And quite frankly, several months ago, we covered the discussion that was had at the city council meeting about this very issue. So this isn't like that this issue is out of the blue. This issue has actually been on the agenda, or at least being discussed by the council at the meetings, and so it isn't something that they're unaware of what the issue is, what the need is, what the controversy is. And what I see here is that it looks like they're trying to then decide by that time at this meeting whether or not they're even going to make a motion, whether or not to put it on or not, and saying, well, because you didn't tell us in advance about it, well, now we're not going to even consider anything. And so your issue is that, so how is he supposed to submit something to be on the agenda?
Well,
he can't submit it at a meeting. He can't submit it before a meeting. He can't submit it after a meeting. Basically, you don't get to submit anything.
Well, the whole point of this is they're saying that you have to submit it for discussion. This is what he's attempting to do. They're attempting to not allow him to submit anything for discussion before he puts it in. You're absolutely right. They're basically trying to stonewall and not allow him to participate or even add things for discussion so they can't even decide whether or not to put it on the agenda.
Right, and here's another finer point too, just to be sure that our viewers are clear on, is that this is a regular city council meeting of the city of Grant, correct?
Correct.
And it's held on the regular day according to the regular schedule.
Right.
And under the open meeting law, if the council wants to talk about something that is not listed specifically on the agenda, they actually can do that under the open meeting law because it is their regular meeting and it is expected that they are doing city business at their regular meeting. So the fact that Mr. Lanoux didn't submit this in advance to have it listed as A, B, and C on the agenda is irrelevant because it doesn't have to be on the agenda listed A, B, and C because this is a regular meeting of the city council where it's expected that they do city business.
Well, the other point is, he's trying to submit this as a discussion item for next month,
Yes,
okay?
right.
Well, they're trying to stop him from even putting it in for discussion before he puts it in there. So basically, they're sewing his lips shut. They're not allowing him to participate.
Let's take the last 3 minutes of our program. Give us an update on your DFL caucuses that you went to.
I attended DFL caucus. It was at the junior high school in Stillwater. And one of the things planks that I wanted to get across, and went unanimously. There was about 24 people at this caucus. As I understand, there were only 15 at the Republican for the city of Grant, which is unusual because Grant is a heavy Republican city. So it kind of goes back to I don't know what apathy is and I don't give a damn. And what I was referencing is there's a act in state legislature right now, 1830 Senate 7 file, school and landfill site prohibition notice. No school may be constructed on land that is located within 1/4 mile of a dump site or a closed landfill. Beginning the 2017-18 school year, a school located within 1/4 mile must provide notice. Okay, so this is what we're going for, so parents can make an intelligent decision. And it was voted that the DFL supports schools not being placed on dump sites that are within 1/4 mile. That was voted on unanimously. So that was interesting. The other background information is Montemedi has had 53 parents remove their children from Wildwoods Elementary School because they were getting headaches and nosebleeds. 2 teachers have had cancer. It's 168 feet from a brownfield, and of course that travels underground, you know. The other interesting thing is, I believe it's either 153 or 173 parents have withdrawn their children from the middle school. So this school district is shrinking. They have about 2,000 regular students. Open enrollment broils it to 3,200, and now it's got to be down to like 2,850. But the problem is people coming into the district, they have no idea that, unless you've been around Grant, this was a dump site from 1954 to 1995, and it had a number on it, Superfund site, but it was plea bargained down through the VIC program to get it so it was okay to build on. And in 2010, you couldn't have built a house on this land site, but you could have built an industrial arena or structure. But in 2012, they increased it so large that by 10 times, instead of 1 part per 20,000, it's
You mean
1
the
part.
standards,
The
the
standard.
standards.
It's 1 part now with the MPCA per 200,000 of PFC. So this is a very dangerous site. There's obvious parents have had concerns with illnesses and cancer. But again, we want to see this go through. It's already had 1 hearing, and I'll be down at
For those of you that are Democrats and are going to your various conventions, you'll probably see this as a resolution that you can vote for to pass along to the next level. So, Mr. Sederstrom, you're asking them to support you and clicking this off as one of the resolutions that you support to be passed on to the next level.
Well, the other thing is, it also had passed in the Republican caucus, so it will be on the Republican plank also, to not put schools on a dump site.
Good.
Right now in
Good.
Minnesota,
It's-
there's 12 schools and dump sites. Wildwood makes it the dirty dozen, and 8 of them are in the Rice Creek watershed.
Wow.
Dangerous.
Wow. Well, this looks like a good issue for us to continue to follow up on as we go forward into the 2018, year 2018. And I want to thank you, Mr. Sederstrom, for being on the program.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you helping perpetuate the all-around grant.
And viewers, thank you for tuning in to Off the Record News. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.